Welcome back. Let's now move on to the panel keynotes and discussions. To chair this session, I would like to invite Professor Michael Wilson, Professor of Drama, Head of Creative Arts, Loughborough University, Leicester, UK. He is also a co-investigator of this project.
Hello, welcome back everybody. I hope everybody is suitably refreshed and replenished after your drinks break. And it's my great pleasure to introduce the next session, which is a keynote, a series of keynotes. And we have 4 speakers. Each will speak for about 10 minutes. And I'm hoping that we'll have some time for some questions and discussion afterwards. So if you have any questions to ask any of the presenters, please put them down in the Q&A, which is the button to the right of your screen, and we'll be able to collect all of the questions then, and hopefully then we'll be able to answer as many as possible. A few words about our speakers. We have 4 speakers, as I said. Archana Kavi is a popular film actor, digital content creator and television host. She made her cinematic debut in 2009, portraying the role of Kunji Malu in the highly successful Nila Tamara. Her role won critical accolades, and she went on to do more than 20 films in Malayalam, Tamil and Telugu. She is one of the first actors in the Malayalam film industry to have breakthrough in the digital space. She's a sensational YouTube content creator and social media influencer. She spoke out about her mental health struggles and journey through her vlogs. She strongly believes that there should be a shift in the way people view and talk about mental health. Our second speaker is Don Palathara. Don is a film director, screenwriter and documentary filmmaker from Kerala. Known for working on shoestring budgets and with new or inexperienced actors, his films are expositions of local Kerala culture and a study on human nature. Palathara's films have gained accolades at several international film festivals, including Moscow International Film Festival and the International Film Festival Rotterdam. The deep influences of a Catholic upbringing echo throughout his filmography, illuminating local Kerala culture and the idiosyncrasies of human behaviour, already apparent in his debut Shavam, an observational satire which follows numerous attendees at a funeral. His films are noted for their contemplative nature, attention to sound design and character-driven narratives. The visual language of his films aids his storytelling in a similar manner, as unhurried sequences and luxurious wide angles serve to capture the verdant Kerala landscapes and the people within them, communicating the eternal continuum between his characters and their environment. Professor Brown is Professor of Health Communication at the Montfort University and brings substantive research expertise in health humanities and has worked on a number of Arts and Humanities Research Council funded projects. The core of his work has focused on the interpretation of human experience across a variety of different disciplines, including healthcare, philosophy, education, and spirituality studies, exploring how this may be understood with a view to improving practice and with regard to theoretical development in the social sciences. Particularly, this concerns notions of governmentality and habitus from Foucauldian and Bourdieusian sociology, and how the analysis of everyday experience could afford novel theoretical developments. Dr. Indu is Professor and Head of the Department of Community Medicine at the Government Medical College, Kollam. She's a member of the Regional Technical Advisory Group on dengue and other arboviral diseases for the World Health Organization Southeast Asia region, and is editor of the Indian Journal of Clinical Medicine. She was the state coordinator for the Prevention of Epidemic and Infectious Diseases Cell, a member of the State Rapid Response Team, State Task Force for COVID vaccination, the State Advisory Group on Immunisation, and the State Adverse Events Following Immunisation Committee. She's done a research fellowship in community health at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, and has developed and validated primary care screening questionnaires for depression, a simple 4-item depression screening tool published in the British Journal of Psychiatry. Her PhD work was on development of community-based interventions for women with depression in primary care. Those are our excellent 4 speakers. Welcome to you all. And first of all, Archana is going to speak on film and mental health experiences. Archana, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. First of all, I want to say that this is like a one-of-a-kind event. I think I'm attending a digital conference for the first time, and it's thank you, MeHeLP, for making me part of this conference. So I just thought I'll share my experience with mental health and what I went through. I remember when I was shooting for my first film, my director then, Mr. Laljo sir, had said, you know, your life is going to change after this film. And I just didn't understand what he meant. And I remember I was 20-year-old, like just a kid, enjoying the attention of the people, like the people I was working with, and loved the job, loved the character, reading about the character and learning lines and performing. All of that was really good. And then this song released, which was Anuraga Vilojanai, which became a popular song. And after that, I just had a big cutoff, like in the sense, I had to, I was everybody's property, or, you know, everybody wanted to be part of me. Everybody wanted to know what I'm doing. And there was no privacy. And I just couldn't, like, it was an overnight change. Nobody prepared me for it. Nobody told me how this is going to happen. And when this happened, I just didn't know how to receive it. Even though people were giving me compliments, I didn't know how to receive it. I was like, Indian parenting, we're not used to compliments. So when people were giving me compliments or feedback or anything, I just didn't know what to do with it. And then years passed, and I always knew something was off, like something is not right, but I just couldn't put a finger on it. I couldn't say that this is the reason, this is what's happening to me. And honestly, back then, mental health wasn't a topic of discussion. Like, my mom works in a medical field, even though it wasn't discussed and it wasn't part of our life. And I could sense that few days before my periods, I was very erratic and I used to behave extremely, I don't want to use the word violent, but something like that. And I just didn't know why it was happening to me. I used to sit and cry for no reason. And it was getting overwhelming as years were passing. And I remember once, actually 3-4 years back, I was attending Sunday Mass. And the sermon was going on, and while the sermon was going on, I had a breakdown, and I wanted to cry. But you know, while the mass, if a person, that to an actress, cries while the sermon, she would be like, oh, she might have sinned something really bad for her to cry at this point of time. So I was controlling myself. I was like, okay, I can't cry right now because mass is going on and everybody is going to call me a sinner. So I need to control myself. But at the same time, I just couldn't stop. So my eyes were watering. I was standing there. My mom was not sitting with me. She was somewhere else. And I was like, okay, God, the only thing I ask you right now is let me not cry while the mass is going on, and let me just finish this peacefully and go back home and be fine. And I remember the mass got over and I was standing outside, and my mom, like, you know, usually she went and she was doing the greeting and meeting with people. And I was like, Mom, you need to come with me and we need to go home. And we went home, and on the way back, I started crying. and I cried for 24 hours straight. There was no stopping. Like my dad came, my brother came, and they were all like confused. And I said, listen, I have some problem. I'm crying. I don't know why I'm crying. I don't have reasons to feel this way, but I want to cry. I feel like the world's coming to an end. I am not feeling right. And that's when I was taken to a gynecologist because they thought it had something to do with my periods. And I remember when I went to the gynecologist, and I mean, in India, mental health is mental health, and even gynecology. Like if you're meeting a gynec, it's a very stressful task. So I remember going to her, and she just telling me that, oh, you know what, take hormone pills, it's gonna be fine. I said, what is my problem? Like, why am I crying? Do you think it has anything to do with mental health? And she said, maybe, but it would be better if you start taking the pills. And I wasn't happy with the answer. And she said, she asked me, are you married? If you're married, then have a child immediately, because you're 30 plus, and you know, how long are you going to wait before having a child? And I was like, wait, I have a mental health issue or like some problem, and you want me to take responsibility of a child? And I left and I said, Mom, I need to meet a psychiatrist. And that's how I met Dr. Manish for the first time. And I have been under treatment for 3 years, and I've been diagnosed with clinical depression and PMDD. It's premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And the journey, I wouldn't say I've completely recovered or everything is better, but I'm aware of what I'm going through. Like, you know, knowledge gives you so much power to face your problems. And, you know, when I wasn't aware of it at all, I would just blame it on anything and everything that was happening around me. But now I know this is why I'm behaving like this, or this is why I'm feeling. And that has been a great help for me. I personally think that, you know, people don't talk about mental health because I don't know, like, you know, it's and honestly speaking, when Dr. Manish wrote prescribed medicines to me, I was angry at him. I was like, oh, so you think I have some really huge problem? I can't be, I can go for therapy, talk therapy, and I'll be fine. But here you're giving me medicines, that means I'm broken. And, you know, just to come in terms with the fact that, oh, you need medication and you need to take medicine, took a lot of effort from my side. And coming from an educated background, coming from a family with nurses and doctors, if I could think like that, I'm just wondering what others are going through. And I think we have to talk about it. And it's really sad that, you know, physical health has parameters to judge what is happening. You know, it's so easy to, oh, you have a cold, this is the medicine, you know, take it and go. Or you have this. It's so easy for you to make somebody else understand also that, oh, I just have a bad tummy, you know, and everybody will understand. But in mental health case, it's so difficult to just say that what you're going through, and to make people understand that this is what I'm going through, and this is my condition, is such a task. And it took more than a year to understand that I have PMDD. And, you know, my medications were changed. You have to be extremely patient with the doctor. You have to be extremely patient with yourself. You need a great support system, which I am blessed with because of my family. But I wish everyone out there has somebody to lean on. And as much as I can hear, I can reach out to you people. I would love to be part of your journey, because I think if I help you, I will help myself too. Similarly, if you hear me, you would get help for yourself as well. So let's just help each other.
Thank you, Archana. That's great. Just demonstrates how important it is and how powerful it is to hear those personal stories. So thank you very much for your bravery and honesty in telling us. That's very important. Our next speaker is Don, and Don is going to talk about the filmmaker's role in promoting mental health literacy. So over to you, Don.
Thank you, Michael. I will share my screen right now. Let me warn you in the beginning itself that this is not a scientific talk at all. I'm a film practitioner, so when I talk about mental health literacy, consider it as an opinion rather than an expert advice. I would like to start with a small experience I have had. One of the perks of being a filmmaker is that you get a lot of messages from people who watch your films. And there are messages of all kinds. And some of them ask for an opportunity to work with you, or some of them just would like to establish a contact. Some others would contact you just to appreciate or even criticize your work. But there's another kind of people whom I am very, very lucky to have come across. They surprise you and leave you numb because you would have nothing to tell them. After the release of my fourth film, one man contacted me and said that he was going through a very tough time and that he had been unable to move on from a recent breakup that he had to face. He opened up to a total stranger, that's me, after watching my film, which was a relationship drama, and said that the film helped him to look at his relationship in a different light, and he is feeling much better. There has never been a conscious effort to while making the film to address the people who went through breakups or heartbreaks, but that was a response this particular person had towards the experience of the film. I asked myself some questions and reached some conclusions. Now, coming back to our topic, the title of my talk gives away a meaning that is slightly generic, but I would like to talk about three different specific topics. First one is narrative films. It is about how, as a narrative filmmaker from India, one can contribute to the society by helping the audience gain better mental health literacy while improving his or her craft also in the process. What I have noticed in Indian films that get released locally and globally is the lack of attention to the character details. If they are masala flicks, a shallow understanding of the human nature can be quite expected. But what surprises me the most is the characterizations in many of the contemporary films that get released outside the mainstream realm, even at bigger festivals. A friend once told me that there are no individuals in India, but only institutions. I don't know how much of it is true in life, but from my experience, it is very true when it comes to the characters in films. As soon as we talk about characters, the discussions naturally has to lead to the relationships between the characters too. While trying to address certain important issue or in the attempt to deliver a pre-planned messages, filmmakers often forget how important it is to work on the characters and their relationships as much as they work on the plot. Film is a medium of communication. While a lot of money and effort is spent on the presentation of a film, the content is often forgotten or treated with lesser importance from my experience. One does not need to directly address mental health issues in order to share a better mental health literacy through the medium of films. They just go to work on defining and constructing their characters with a better understanding. I know that this is not a small topic or something that can be communicated in a short time frame. Even though the structures of many films from the West look the same, one positive aspect about these dramas is the effort they invest into developing their characters, including the hero and the villain. Most of the time, either of them would have a reason to behave the way they do. And when they don't,
I think we may have lost Don momentarily. Let's hope he can come back. Let's give him a minute or two. If you could just bear with us. You're back, Don.
Okay. It is easy to create characters with goals and external obstacles, but what is going on in their mind? What are their inner struggles? These questions are usually skipped by the creators. Second topic I wanted to talk about was how we portray mental health issues on screen. For a quick example, while trying to portray a character with schizophrenia or Alzheimer's, we could do a better research on the condition, its causes, or its effects on lives of the people who suffer from them or the people around them. Taking an artistic liberty to show something honest is entirely different from portraying an irresponsible, half-baked idea. What I said above does not mean that art can be made only through extensive research and study. That leads to a third topic, the filmmaker's mental health and its connection to his or her art. Art can be a display of a subjective experience also. Being honest to our subjective experience is a way to a better understanding of a mental health. While you approach filmmaking in an honest way, without letting other agendas take over in the course, you yourself will get certain emotional catharsis. One gets to face his or her inner fears and extreme desires and create a window to vent out those emotions and thoughts. One question I keep asking myself while writing, directing, or editing a film is this: is this an honest work? Would these characters behave like this if this situation was real? So how do one create something that's honest? Are you addressing some of your personal fears, thoughts, or dilemmas through the film? That way I'm an advocate of personal cinema too. We all know that making a film is not as economical as writing a poem, but the world of cinema is evolving. We all have access to the technologies, unlike 10 or 20 years ago. So there is a better opportunity now to create personal films, and we need more of them. Once that happens, you start getting people's reactions, and they are about how relatable these characters are or how subjective the experience felt. If your craft lacks honesty, the response would be superficial too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. It seems that honesty is starting to become a recurring theme of this session already. And you said at the beginning, almost apologetically, that you weren't an expert in mental health. It wasn't a scientific presentation, and yet you went on to demonstrate just why actually everybody here has knowledge and experience and expertise that can contribute to for these very important sort of public discourses, whether we're clinicians, whether we're researchers, whether we're artists, whether we're service users, whether we're carers, whoever we are, it needs all our voices and all our knowledge to come together. So thank you very much for that. Can I also remind our audience to please put your questions in the Q&A tab on the right of your screen, so we can gather those up by the end of the session. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Professor Brown, and he is going to speak on creative practice for mental health and well-being. Over to you, Brown. Brown is an old friend. Well, Brown is a long-standing friend. I won't call him an old friend. He's a long-standing friend. I'm looking forward to hearing what he's got to say today. Brown.
Thank you so much for that very generous introduction, Mike, and it's a great pleasure to be here to talk about some of our work. Let me just try and share the screen. What I'm going to be talking about here is perhaps some of the background to our concerns within this MeHeLP project. Why are we so interested in the role of creative practices for mental health and well-being? And why is this important? What we've been trying to do, myself and my colleagues in the UK and in other parts of the world, is trying to bring together a number of different strands in the relationship between healthcare, social care, and creative activities. The medical humanities have been around for quite a while, but there may be a whole variety of other professional groups, the nurses, the care assistants, even the physiotherapists. All these professions are starting to get interested in the role of creative activity and the value of creative activity in healthcare contexts. Even in a country like the UK, which has a very extensive and well-funded healthcare system, there are an enormous number of informal carers. And this group of people have a stake and interest in the role of creative activity in promoting health, well-being, resilience, and recovery. Importantly, in the light of what many of our colleagues have been saying earlier in this conference, it offers the opportunity for ground-up knowledge transfer. Knowledge doesn't have to come from the experts. It may just as easily, and perhaps even more importantly, come from people who have lived experience of the problems and conditions and trials and tribulations that we are talking about in the context of mental health. Now, I'd like to tell you about a couple of projects I've been involved in over the last few years. The first of these was a project called Creative Practices Mutual Recovery, where I worked with Professor Wilson and others, looking at the role of creative activity in promoting recovery for people with mental health problems, but also informal carers and practitioners as well. Trying to bring people together to do something creative in a situation where there wasn't a hierarchy between the experts and the clients, where they were working together, shared activity towards a common goal. And there were some projects including photography, storytelling, which Mike led, music, sculpture, yoga, and a South American dance and martial arts discipline called capoeira. I'll just deal with a couple of these strands just to give you an idea of what happened. Here's some examples from the sculpture strand. Now, these were people, service users, carers, and practitioners who weren't trained sculptors. There was an artist leading the workshop, and here's some of the things that people produced, things like tiles and flowers. If any of you are familiar with the work of the artist Grayson Perry, who's a ceramicist working in the UK, a lot of the things that people produced look very much like his kind of work. And it just goes to show that people were able to produce interesting and artistically evocative objects by participating in these workshops. And that's another important thing, mastery experiences, being able to do something, show them that you can do something well. that you can succeed at something. This has a therapeutic value in its own right. And another thing that people did in the sculpture program was they made masks. And again, these are examples of things that have been created by people with no particular artistic background and artistic training. These reminded me very much of the work of the sculptor Anthony Gormley. So even relatively untrained amateur artists can achieve, under the right circumstances, can achieve near professional levels of production. But it's not about doing something professional, of course, and a lot of it's about having fun. It's about shared activity towards a common goal. And here are some examples of things people said about their participation in these workshops. Having a shared experience, working together on tasks, building social relationships, having a mix of people rather than a hierarchy, getting the service users and carers and practitioners to work together on a common set of activities, shared activity towards a common goal. That seemed to be very powerful too. Another example is a project that our colleagues at the Royal College of Music in London did. This was based on music workshops or drumming workshops, and they got together mental health service users and carers and music students, and these were led by a professional facilitator. Now, I hope that short video played for you successfully, so you were able to get a sense of what the music workshops involved. Here's a few comments from participants who felt that they benefited from these sessions. In the first quote, it almost seems like there's a particular kind of consciousness, a different kind of reality that is evoked by participating in these workshops. Learning something new and feeling positive about it. Those mastery experiences I mentioned earlier. Creating something with a team of people you've never met before. Feeling that you can just do anything together. That experience of shared activity towards a common goal that I mentioned earlier, that seems to be very important. As well as all these quotations, we also used questionnaire measures of well-being, the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, and a measure of social connectedness by Jenny Secker and her colleagues. So it wasn't just people's own words quotes. Indeed, the people in the music workshop showed changes in their immune system function, more cytokine activity, that kind of thing. So the experience was able to get under the skin and make a difference to them in all sorts of profound ways. Another example I'd like to give you is a project we did this time in India. And this was using community theatre as a way of exploring and developing resilience amongst people who had recently migrated to the area. This was in Pune. People who recently migrated to the area, perhaps looking for a better life or looking for work. There's a great deal of internal migration in India. An estimate, 2013, so this is some years out of date, suggests that there were well over 300 million internal migrants within India. And when people talk about migration, they often talk about things like anxiety and depression and people being very abject and very needy. However, we were trying to change the frame a little bit and think about this in terms of resilience. And we were lucky enough to work with some talented link workers and community workers and research assistants, as well as a theatre company in Pune, to be able to create an ongoing engagement with people in a low-income neighbourhood. And here's a few pictures on the slides of what the neighbourhood looked like, and there's a picture there of us having a research meeting. And we were able to engage with local leaders, and we attempted to empanel a community steering group, as well as conducting interviews with local people about their experiences of migration, and providing a whole range of creative activities. There's some more pictures of some of our research officers and research assistants and people in the local area. And here's some pictures of other kinds of activities. There were craft activities. People made banners and textile objects. People made props for the community play that this resulted in. People made things like posters. There were things like percussion bands where people used items of junk they'd found around the neighborhood, as well as the play itself. Through a series of narrative interviews, we also discovered something about the reasons for migration. People were moving away from recession in the farming industry. It had become apparently increasingly difficult to make a living farming. People were therefore escaping poverty and hardship. People were sometimes escaping family conflict. But rather than being just needy and abject, people were displaying remarkable ingenuity, resilience, and resourcefulness. And this is something that we were seeking to celebrate in the project and in the play itself. The importance of social relationships, of neighbours, of family members, of friends of the family, those support systems were foregrounded by many of the people who spoke to us. The hope for a better life, maybe for oneself, but perhaps especially for one's children, wanting one's children to get an education and better themselves, that life might be hard for us, but it'll be better for our children. That seemed to be an important feature in some of these conversations and discussions. So from this initiative in Pune, we were able to show how community theatre had this potential for community engagement and empowerment. It's something that people seem to be fascinated by and seem to want to get involved in, particularly the children. The children were absolutely vital. They were able to, they showed an interest in what was going on, but they went back home and told their parents about it and got some of the adults interested as well. We were able to not only put on the community play, which involved local people, but this toured around, and they were able to perform the play elsewhere, including in a big theatre at one of our conferences in India. And some of our Indian partners were able to visit us in the UK for a further conference to disseminate some of what we learned in this process. So, what's so special about creative activities and creative assets then? Well, as I've just highlighted, there's an opportunity for more mutuality. These kinds of creative activities, sculpture, music, plays and performances, have an ability to break down some of the hierarchies and some of the divisions, to enable, as people like Andy and Mike have said earlier this afternoon, for some of those stories to come to the fore that perhaps haven't really had the opportunity to be spoken, to be told, and to be heard previously. What we've been able to do also in some of our work in the UK and maybe to some extent in India is try and get other groups of people involved who are often not part of the official dialogue about health or mental ill health. Informal carers, people in the charitable and voluntary sector, civil society organisations. In some of my work in the UK, I've found people joining things like amateur sports teams, allotment societies, amateur dramatics groups, and so on. These have contributed a great deal to people's social connectedness and their ability to undertake a social recovery. There's a great value, as I alluded to earlier, in getting people working together towards a common goal. Indeed, in the UK, you could almost say that creative activity is a kind of shadow health service. And we've been very fortunate in our work in that funding organisations are starting to support this. They're starting to take interdisciplinarity seriously. They're starting to take the arts in health seriously. So we've been fortunate to be able to do work of the kind I've just described in the UK, but also in India too, in Pune, and latterly, as we're talking about in this conference, in Kerala. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, and gender rebels, on that note, I'll draw to a close. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Brown. As insightful as ever, and particularly interesting, how you draw that very important point around the need to support our creative health as well, and the links between our creative well-being and our mental well-being. Really important points, I think. So thank you very much indeed. As before, please put your questions in the Q&A panel to the right, and we shall move on to our next speaker. Last but certainly not least, Dr. Indu, who is going to be talking on community mobilization for mental health literacy programs. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. I must take the clue from Archana. I have a presentation, but I think I'll take a few minutes before I move to the presentation, because it was a real wonderful narrative on the experience, as everyone, as Professor Brown or Dawn was also mentioning about the role of art. Art is so powerful, right? So in whatever be the setting, the whatever be the level of literacy, whatever be the music heals, right? Watching movies. So it's so powerful and so communicating. So when we are talking about engaging community, especially in the area of mental health, right? When we talk about mental health literacy, it is about understanding mind. Brain is the seat of mind, but it is connected to society, people around us. So it's really a mix of art and science. And actually the art part of it should lead us forward, the humanity forward. Let's take the recent example of COVID, right? So we know science, we know the virus, we know its structure, we know how the adenovirus vector takes the genetic material into your body as a vaccine, the immune system. But finally, when it comes to engaging the community to receive those 2 doses of the shots, right, we need to, that is engaging the community. So the way you engage them is different. But in mental health, there is a lot of loading of stigma into it. While I was listening to Archana's story, it reminded me of Deepika Padukone's narrative. There also her mother was there, right, in her Mumbai apartment when the mother was about to leave. Are you okay? When the mother asks, she breaks down. I still remember her video, and she became the ambassador of the World Health Day theme on April 7, 2017. Let me just share my slides, which has some evidence into it. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. Okay, that's all the theory. Next slide, it's about engaging the next. Yeah, so it means, in planning, in execution, in evaluating how successful it is, even if it is a piece of art. Now we are talking about music, theater, and all. The participation is important, and sustaining is really important. How long we can carry this forward? Next slide, please. And we all know about, those are the different stages of consulting, involving, collaborating, and finally the community, the for whom we are trying to involve, right? They should finally take the lead. Next slide, please. Okay, so we know that this is one of the prevalent studies. It's very common. It's in general practice. I'll just quote a story from WHO's module on suicides. Depression, as we know, is one of the commonest mental health problems underlying suicide. It's a story of a bus conductor from Sri Lanka. The mother's narrative, right? Actually, the conductor jumps into the Palathara river while the bus was on his journey, and the mother says, "There's something wrong with my son. He consulted many doctors, but everyone said he was okay." So depression is something that remains unidentified in general practice, and so this is one of our studies in general practice setting, which reported something like 1 in 5 to 1 in 4. Can we have this? But people are not aware. So translating or informing people is important, right? Can we have the next slide? Next slide, please. Yeah. So it's quite common, but very often unreported, right? People know what diabetes is. If you have a chest pain, you will go to and seek care. But actually, depression is much more common, but people don't seek help. Next slide, please. So we also need simple tools of identifying. Just like everyone knows if we have a chest pain, there is sweating, it may be heart attack. I have to go. But then the symptoms of depression are not quite common. Can I have the next slide? So this is one of my MPhil thesis, primary care screening questionnaire for depression. It's a 4-item tool. So to next slide, please. Those are the questions in Malayalam. It's a regional language in Kerala, which is spoken by some 30 million people. So the 4 questions are Manasinu Sangadavum Vishamavum Rendayitte. So it's about depressed mood. Do you feel sad over the past 2 weeks? Second is Kairingal Cheyan Talparyakurravum Utsahakurravum. Right? So loss of interest. Someone who is interested to listen to music, teach, right? All of a sudden lose interest. That is second. And third, excessive tiredness, Sheenavum Talarchi. And fourth is loss of sleep. Sleep, as we know, is a biologic symptom of depression. So we need simple tools, right? We can't have all the criteria to be taught, just like, chest pain, right? Think of depression. So these tools are also important. So who will give the support? Archana was talking about her family support. Very often the strongest support usually comes from your friends and family. But, everyone may not have that kind of a support. So it's important that we have a community-based, a system to engage people. Can we have the next slide? So as part of research, we try to, so this is the healthcare workers. We try to see who can screen depression, who can provide support. Actually, we tried the ASHA workers, Anganwadi, but neighborhood people were a little reluctant, right? So if someone comes to know about my depression status, the next door neighbor, I may not be, many parents, especially when I was talking to the relatives, the immediate close relatives, they said, oh, no. Let it be someone who is a trained person, may not be very from the exact neighborhood. So actually, if we can train, this is the junior public health nurse, who is the public health worker at the periphery. Can I have the next slide? So they can, this is one example of a community-based intervention. Similarly, across the world, wherever we engage community and, have them on board along with, of course, we may need, for moderate to severe depression, we may need antidepressants because of the biology, the dopamine, the neurotransmitters. Definitely, there is a biology to it. The mind is the seat of, mind is the brain, but it's connected to the society and several other, the environment and all. So it's really important that we have such models and evidence, and we tell people that, these kinds of interventions do help. And you come out of it. Just like you treat any other physical illness, we can just come out of it. Can I have the next slide? Next. So this is specific to the Kerala context. Kudumbashree is a women's self group in the Kerala context. It is actually under the local self-government. Some 4 million families and women. So they have the Community Development Society, CDS, ADS, and the neighborhood groups called Ayal Kootam in Malayalam. So every Sunday they meet. So they have a health code. So these are some of the organized areas or units in the community, units through which we can engage the community. Definitely schools and colleges, and we have to target the youth. And there again, the student police cadet, the national service scheme oversees our responsibility to children. Another initiative, currently with the Women and Child Department, the Anganwadis, which are 0 to 6, preschool children and mothers, the palliative care. Of course, a lot of community engagement happens in palliative care. Of course, mental health component is also part of it. The role of non-governmental organizations, the residents' associations. Can we have the next slide? So the role of media, it's very, very, very important, right? Engaging community, including social media. The role of film, I think Don was also mentioning about that. So he talked about honesty. So I think these days the movies are becoming really powerful communicators and media for engaging the community. So in Kerala, actually there was a lot of discussion in relation to this year's award movie, The Great Indian Kitchen. The gender is a big talk of the town. So it's happening all over the world, but I think in Kerala also because of the level of literacy and several other reasons, though India is very heterogeneous. So it may not be uniformly so in all parts of the country. Can I have the next slide? So social media, with one click, the messages go. So these are all like examples of engaging students in school. So we think that mental health is something that carries a lot of stigma in schools. It's not so. It's not only about labeling. It's not about finding going and giving advice and all. It's positive mental health. You talk about well-being now. Mind is very much part of well-being, the concept of well-being, wellness. So we need to engage them. See, after the lockdown and post-COVID, they were all with their online classes. Both college and the school students, when they're going back, it's really important that we take care of their mental health also. Can I have the next slide? So the student police cadet, the advantage of these kinds of structures in the Kerala context is that they can also be part of peer mentors. Actually, gender and drug abuse, another major issue. So we have to, in addressing all these specific issues, we need people to be part of it, not just professionals. So identifying them, whether the Kudumba Street, the student police cadet, or even the residents association. Can I have the next slide? These are all the national service scheme. Actually, this is one of the group works we conducted during one of the NSS camps. Can I have the next slide? So engaging parents, it's really important. So we have the structures. All schools have their parents, teachers. Usually fathers may not attend the PTA meetings, but now these are online. So it is important that we engage. These are all there because organized structures have the advantage of, it's more easy to access. Can I have the next slide? So rebranding the disease states is really important. Next is, engaging celebrities. I think I thought of putting Archana Kavi's photo, but then I thought I should not be distracting during the talk. Otherwise, okay. Can I have the when we talk about depression or mental health, it should not be negative images. You should have a very positive image and educate about the biology. It's not somebody's fault. It's not my fault that I developed depression, right? It's just like, any other physical illness. So these images of the brain, the biology part of it. Can I have the next slide? And this is Black Dog Institute. Actually, I did as part of my fellowship in community mental health. I was attached to this. It's in the city. It's Sydney, University of New South Wales. So research, Black Dog. Actually, Winston Churchill used to call depression a black dog. He said it's just like I felt like a black dog is sitting on my back, right? When there is depression, right? So that's why the Black Dog Institute, that name has come. So let's talk about it. It's important that we talk about it. Let's talk about emotions. it's not something wrong. Let's take it in the positive. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to do, to err. It's okay to fail in relations. It's really important that we engage our youth and children how to handle relations, right? So the way the social media and all are handling these is, it's something wrong. It's not so. So let's openly, talk about these issues. And finally, in depression, let's talk first the theme for the World Health Day theme in 2017. Actually, Government of Kerala launched a program called Ashwas. Ashwas means relief. On that day, it's a community-based intervention to manage depression. I think a long way to go even for that program. Anyway, let's talk about it. I appreciate and congratulate the entire team of MeHeLP for taking up this. It's a real privilege and honor for me to share the screen with Dawn, Archana, Brown, and Mike. Thanks once again to the entire team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all our speakers for their contributions, their insights, very, very valuable. We've had a few questions in the Q&A, and we have just a little bit of time for those. But I'm also going to invite Professor Raghu Raghavan, the principal investigator on the MeHeLP project, to join us. So I hope he's going to suddenly appear on stage. I was told that might happen. But while he is doing that, let's have a look at some of the questions. So there's a question for Archana and Don from Andy Barrett at Excavate Theatre. And Andy asks, do they think that there is a much greater willingness to talk about mental health within the work that is made by a younger generation? So is there a generational thing happening here?
Don, do you? Okay. I personally think that, of course, there is more awareness and people are willing to talk about it. But also from my personal experience, what I felt is it's like a bunch of people like blindfolded, and they're just walking here and there. They don't know, like there's very little information about mental health, and there's very little unfortunately, I would trust Google more than some of the doctors I have met in my life. It might come across really rude, but that's been my personal experience. Because in India especially, they do not talk. They do not tell you. They think that if they tell you, you would overreact, or I don't know what it is, but information, the fact that the information is very less. I think our generation is willing to learn, willing to change, willing to spread the knowledge, but unfortunately there isn't much, is what I feel.
Thank you. Don, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, in my experience, people do talk about mental health much more than how it used to be 10 or 20 years ago, and people do talk about going to therapist as a very normal thing these days. Otherwise, it used to be a stigma in the earlier days. Still it's not like in UK or in other parts of the world, but still we have a long way to go. That's what I think.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to see that Raghu is now.
Can I add one
joined.
more?
Oh yes, of course.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that even movies like Kumbhalangi Night is being made, which depicts mental health in more realistic way. So of course there is a positive change. What I wanted to say.
Thank you. Now, in a moment, Raghu, I know you've got a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I'm going to ask you for your response generally to the presentations, and you can roll those questions into that. I'm going to do that in a moment, but to give you a little chance to just gather your thoughts, that was me giving you a 2-minute warning on that one. So give you a chance to gather your thoughts. We'll just squeeze another question in. And someone's posted a question for Brown here, Brown.
Oh, yes. Great. I see.
Sorry, can you see the question?
Did you read it out first, or yeah?
The rest of the audience, just in case. So this is an amazing example of action research. How can we persuade UK health authorities like CCGs to fund such projects more?
Well, the UK experience suggests that people whose hands are on the purse strings are probably more interested in this kind of thing now than they were in the past. Witness the fact that we've been able to raise money from UK funding agencies to pursue these sorts of questions and explore these sorts of experiences. Within healthcare, people are looking at increasingly at initiatives like social prescribing, where rather than reaching for the metaphorical prescription pad and giving them medication, they're advised or encouraged to do some sort of activity. And it may be a creative activity, an arts activity, or something of the kind. There's also initiatives like arts by prescription in the UK and so on. As regards the situation in India, which may be of interest to more of our speakers and some of our audience, again, I'm an outsider. I'm from the UK, but again, I'm gaining the impression that people in influential positions are starting to get more interested in this kind of thing, are recognizing the value of arts and cultural activity in promoting well-being and recovery. There's more and more evidence. Going back to what Indu was saying about the underlying biology, there's more and more evidence that this kind of experience can get under the skin. Not only what I was mentioning about music and immunology a few moments ago, but with functional magnetic resonance imaging, it's possible to see what people's brains look like when they're producing or appreciating music, when they're producing or appreciating poetry, and so on. These experiences get under the skin and make a difference to the underlying physiology too. That kind of evidence, I think, is very persuasive to hard-nosed policymakers and research funding bodies. So I think, I think we're pushing at an open door. There's a very stiff spring trying to keep it closed, but I think we can prise it open.
So we'll have to lend our collective muscle to pushing that door open. All hands to the wheel to push it open. We have one more question, I think, before we go to Raghu. So I can give you the final word, Raghu. And I know you've got a question for Dr. Indu as well, wrapped up in there. But there's a quick question here, and that's come in Malayalam movies. Depression is a highly unnoticed disorder, or more than any other mental disorders, even though depression and suicide rates are highly prevalent in Kerala. What could be the reason?
In Malayalam movies, what was it? In Malayalam movies, depression is depicted as?
I think the question is that it's not often depicted compared to other mental disorders, and yet the reality is that there are very high rates of that.
Yeah, in spite of the high, because usually, art can sometimes be a mirror to what is happening in the society, and so in that way, it is less represented. Agree to that. I'm not very familiar with all the movies, but there are many movies. For example, the Hey Jude on autism. Very, very, very splendid. I think Ambili. Many recent movies. Trance. There are several movies. I think if you closely follow, I think Dawn's recent movie, all those really depict mental health in different dimensions, but depression per se or the stress. I think let's hope that there is more reflections on this. It's not exactly, what is, may not be exactly what is happening in the society, but definitely movie. Movie is, I think it's the most powerful of all the art forms. Of course, the music, theater, all these are there, but I think engaging, especially children and youth, I think, and engaging a larger audience, movie is the most powerful. Let's hope. Because now, as Dawn and Archana were responding to the earlier question, this generation are definitely, I think there is a lot of progress in those directions.
Thank you. That's great.
Can I add something to?
Yes, please do, Dawn.
Yeah. From what I understand, in Malayalam movies, we usually try to escape, such questions. We try not to address something that is, the causes of depression or anything dark, anything, that is that goes deeper than, skin. From what I understand is that we usually try to always have a happy ending for most of our films, and try to show a very colorful world. But maybe, that's a way of coping, our society's own problems, or it's another way of dealing with them. But in the future, you will definitely see a lot more movies addressing, mental health issues, especially depression and other mental health issues that are common in Kerala. I think the young generation are exploring a lot more subjects than they used to in the past.
That's great. Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. We have just a couple of minutes left in this session as the timer is running down on us. And as I promised, I'm going to turn to Raghu to give, if you could sum up your thoughts for us, Raghu, on this session.
Well, what can I say? It's an excellent session. I think it's a mind-blowing session in relation to how film, theater, and community mobilization could actually make things actually happen. And I think it is an important area of discussion and of knowledge sharing. And I think I'm glad that we are part of it, and that we, Mike, Brown, and Andy, and many of others, that we have an opportunity to kickstart that process. And we have been here as a facilitator for those things to actually happen. And I'm very fortunate that we are in that position in enabling that conversation to happen. But I think there are some things here. I think there were some conversations around Malayalam films and depression. And I think, why is it that in all the films, when a mental distress actually happens, everybody goes to have an attempted suicide? Is it automatically encouraging suicidality? When I think we had to actually work with some of our filmmakers in terms of not everything. We don't want to actually go into suicide mode. We want to actually go for a different mode as to how people might actually address some of those mental distress or mental ill health issues. So I think that is something that need to be having a wider conversation. And I think there is the other issue is actually the whole medicalization of mental health. And I think we have successfully medicalized grief. And I think it is an area that is worthy of discussion from the policy perspective and also from the professional education perspective. Not everything requires medicine. Not everything requires, the kind of super duper up-to-date surgery or intervention or some of those things. Some of them do, but I think it's important that we look at other ways of actually doing things as well. And some of the areas that we mentioned here with Brown's conversations, and also Dr. Indu's conversations. And I think it's important that we look at different ways of actually managing ourselves. And I think, what happened before Prozac came on board? I mean, how did we actually manage to deal with depression? And I think, it's important that we need to reflect back. And there has been many ways. And there's a cultural heritage and the knowledge around cultural heritage. And also our traditions and customs and social norms, which are good things as well. Not everything is superstition. But I think there are good things that actually make meaning for each and every one of us. And I think it's important that we absorb that, we adore that, and we practice that in the best way possible as to how that actually be very purposeful for you. And I think it's actually to have this forum, to have a wider discussion around that has been very much useful, I think. So I think it's been a pleasure to be part of this process, and I'm very privileged to actually start that discussion process somehow with my big team and also all the great speakers here. And it's great to connect with you. And I don't think the conversation ends today. I want to have the conversation for the next 10 years. And I want the 36 million people in Kerala to talk about mental health. That is my ambition.
Well, we'll look forward to that, Raghu. Thank you very, very much. I'm afraid that means we've run out of time. The clock has ticked its way down, and in front of me it says 0 minutes, 0 seconds. So we don't want to outstay our welcome and keep people from their refreshments or the next session or whatever it is.
Mike.
Yes.
And thank you for excellent sharing of this session. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're extremely busy. You're in Berlin. You're not here. And then, taking the time for the first session. I keep on saying the morning because for us it was the morning session. So taking the time for the first session and also for taking the time for sharing. Thank you very much indeed.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure. And such fabulous presentations. So on behalf of everybody, let me thank all of the presenters, and we hope to see you again in another session before very long indeed. Thank you very much, everyone. Round of applause.
Thank you.